Your Honor, this is a broken family, and it's due to him. The words cut through the courtroom with the precision of a blade. Gasps resounded from the wooden benches as individuals changed positions, shocked at the rawness of what had just been uttered. Janelle Brown stood before the witness stand, her hands shivering slightly, yet her voice firm and measured, shaking the air with a weight that could not be avoided. For years the world had known her as the quiet one, the level-headed, even-tempered wife who never raised her voice. On camera, she had always been portrayed as practical, calm, and nearly detached from the turmoil raging within the Brown household. But the cameras never quite captured the hurricane within her heart. And now, in this courtroom, under oath, Janelle was no longer keeping secrets. She wasn't talking for the cameras, or for the entertainment of the world. She was talking for herself, for her children, and for the years of silence that had cost her more than anyone would ever truly comprehend. In another corner of the room, Kody Brown stood rigid and protective, arms folded tightly across his chest like a shield, his face red with rage, his lips clenched together in a thin, sharp line. He didn't look quite so much like the proud patriarch he once seemed, and more like a man trapped by the truth. The fluorescent lights of the courtroom bounced off his restless eyes, giving away the tempest churning within him. He wasn't accustomed to this. He wasn't accustomed to Janelle being in control with her words. The judge shifted forward, eyes narrowing, clearly attuned to the scope of what was being revealed. The air in the room was thick, as if everyone in there knew that they were on the verge of something that could never be unspoken. And yet it wasn't only the words that shocked the room, it was the gravity behind them. Janelle took a deep, trembling breath, her chest rising and falling as though the words had been sitting inside her for decades, waiting to escape. Her eyes were glassy, but not weak. They were eyes that had seen too much. Years of neglect, favoritism, broken promises, and the kind of emotional isolation that left scars no one could see. The silence continued to stretch. The rustle of papers, the squeak of a chair, the soft hum of the air conditioner, each tiny sound seemed magnified in the quiet following Janelle's announcement. No one was willing to move. She set her hand lightly on the wood rim of the stand, anchoring herself. Her voice, softer now, had even greater authority. For so long, she started, I talked myself into silence. I reminded myself that patience was a virtue, that silence was a shield. I thought that if I kept going, if I bore the burden of maintaining calm, it would suffice, that somehow the man over there would see the harm he was causing. But I was mistaken. Her words quivered on the brink, as glass would if it were to shatter. But she did not cease. This family, her voice cracked and she faltered, collecting herself, this family has been disintegrating for years, not because we didn't care for one another, not because the children didn't attempt to do their part, but because one man decided to place himself above all others. Because one man decided pride over presence, ego over love, control over compassion. A ripple moved through the room. Christine, sitting behind Janelle, lowered her head into her hands, tears slipping through her fingers. Meri's face was pale, her jaw trembling as she fought to keep her composure. Even Robin shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her usually guarded expression cracking under the pressure of truth. But it wasn't only the wives who hurt. It was the kids, spread out in the crowd, their faces showing years of pain that could no longer be ignored. Janelle's grip on the podium became tighter. Your Honor, she said, voice finding a firmer ground, I am not standing here today as his wife. I am not standing here as a woman who was a part of a TV show. I am standing here as a mother. A mother who saw her children beg for love that never materialized. A mother who cradled them when they cried because the father was away. A mother who saw her sons battle for his approval, only to be rejected. And I cannot remain quiet anymore. Kody shifted in his chair, his mouth opening as if he was about to say something, but his attorney put a hand on his arm, a non-verbal demand that he remain silent. His eyes seared Janelle, but she did not glance back at him. She would not give him that control. Instead, she gazed straight ahead, at the judge, the jury, the truth. You see, for years I kept telling myself he was just busy, that he couldn't be in more than one place at a time, that someday he would realize what he was doing to us. But then it hit me. He never intended to change. He never intended to appear, because in his head, he had already made up his mind as to who mattered most. Her words hung in the air like smoke. The implication was stark. Kody had picked favorites, leaving behind children who once loved him, who once considered him their hero. Janelle's voice cracked again, and this time she didn't try to hold back the tears that welled in her eyes. They streamed down her face as she spoke, her pain open for all to see. I am here today because my silence has already cost too much. It cost me my marriage. It cost my children their father. And it cost us one of the brightest lights in this family. The saying of Garrison's name did not have to be heard. Everyone in that room understood the shadow over this family, the open wound that could never close. Gasps and wails spread through the gallery as Janelle's sorrow filled the room. The judge's face softened, but his composure was still professional. His pen tapped against the desk, but he never looked away from Janelle. The silence was not shocking anymore, it was choking. The crushing weight of years, and secrets and heartbreak pressed down on all of them in the room. And yet, amidst that weighty silence, Janelle remained upright, shattered, yes, shaken without a doubt, but also more brave than she had ever been. For years the fans had watched her be the quiet friend, the one who avoided the drama. But today, they were seeing a different Janelle. A Janelle who no longer felt obligated to defend Kody. A Janelle who preferred truth to fear. And while the courtroom hung suspended in that god-awful silence, one truth became impossible to deny. Janelle Brown was finally prepared to speak. The silence in the room still rang with Janelle's initial statement when the judge discreetly cleared his throat and motioned for her to continue. His expression was stern but not cruel, as if he too could feel that the words that Janelle bore were heavy with years of silence. Janelle clenched her fingers tighter around the edge of the wooden witness stand. Her knuckles turned white. She took a slow breath, the kind one takes before jumping into cold water. When she continued to speak, her voice trembled at first, but with each successive word, her conviction grew firmer. For years, she replied, her voice matter-of-fact, I put my happiness aside to keep this family intact. I gave him 6 beautiful children. I gave him respect. I gave him loyalty. I stood up for him when others judged us. I stood by him when others doubted him. And what did I get back? Neglect, indifference, silence. The words hung in the air like a gong inside the courtroom, clear and irrevocable. A hush swept through the benches, as if the crowd itself had been waiting decades to have her utter them out loud. Kody leaned forward in his chair, his jaw clenched, his arms crossed even farther over his chest. His foot drummed against the floor, but his eyes never wavered from Janelle. His face was a mask of held-back fury, but Janelle didn't blink. Not today. Her voice increased in power, her pain honing into steel. I saw my babies cry for a father who was never present. I pleaded with him. Her voice broke and she laid a hand on her chest as if holding her heart steady. I pleaded with him to appear, to be present, to love them all the same. But instead, he played favorites. He played control. He played himself. The silence that ensued was oppressive. A weighty silence hung over the courtroom, as if the air itself would not move. And then her voice shattered. Janelle's control gave way, and the dam she had maintained for so long burst wide apart. Sobs ran down her cheeks as her words spilled forth like rocks torn from the bottom of her heart. I would sit with my children at night, embracing them while they asked me, "Why doesn't Dad want to be with us?" Do you know what that is like, Your Honor? Do you know what it is like to look into your child's eyes and have no answer because the truth is too cruel to tell? She blotted her face hastily, her shoulders shuddering. The courtroom sensed her shattered heart. It was not just testimony, it was confession, wailing and plea rolled into one. My sons. Her voice trembled. They needed a father, not a face on TV, not a man who appeared when it was convenient. They needed a father who would sit at the table, who would rejoice in their triumphs, who would pick them up when they fell. But she flung out her arm violently in Kody's direction, her voice increasing for the first time. He was more concerned with guarding his pride than he was with guarding his children. The courtroom exploded into whispers and gasps. Christine clapped a tissue to her eyes, her entire body shuddering with muffled sobs. Meri stared down at her hands, shame on her face. Even Robin, normally calm, seemed shaken as she wrung her hands, not meeting Janelle's gaze. The judge's gavel came down once on the desk. Order in the court. But no gavel, no order could erase the naked reality that was already out. Janelle braced herself once more. She took a harsh breath, still weeping, her voice breaking but unstoppable. I wanted to hope he cared. I wanted to hope he would one day wake up and see what he was doing. But he never did. Instead, he walked away from us. He walked away from me, and he walked away from our children. Can you count how many birthdays he missed? Can you count how many tears he disregarded? How many times he favored one home while mine's starvation hung for bits of attention? She shook her head, her voice dropping to a near whisper, but the whole room inched forward to listen. I took on both of them. I bore their pain, their confusion, their rage, and I bore it by myself. Because the man who was meant to be at my side was too busy standing over us, expecting respect he never deserved. The final words strike like a hammer, echoing off the walls of the room. Janelle paused, her body shaking with the force of unloading it all. She just stood there for a long moment, her tears blurring the wood grain of the stand, her shoulders heaving and falling in deep breaths. The judge regarded her with a profound, unreadable face. The jury wrote notes frantically, but everyone else in the courtroom? They sat there in horrified silence, their hearts shattering with hers. And then finally, Janelle raised her head, eyes puffy but unafraid. I am finished bearing his burden. I am finished making it seem like this family dissolved because of anyone other than ourselves. The truth is easy, Your Honor. The truth is standing right in front of you. She gestured directly at Kody, her hand trembling with anger and sorrow, and the truth is that he let us disintegrate. He selected his pride over his children, and because of that, this family will never be intact again. Gasps swept through the room once more, followed by stifled sobs from the gallery. Gabrielle and Savannah, sitting side by side in the stands, dropped their heads, their anguish clear to all. The judge brought his gavel up a second time, but this time he did not bring it down. Instead, he sat back in his chair, his eyes fixed on Janelle, as if even he recognized that this was not the sort of testimony you cut off. The silence that came after it was unlike anything else. It wasn't the stunned silence of her first words. It was deeper, weightier. The silence of a truth so naked that nobody wanted to breathe too hard, fearing it would shatter the moment. And in that silence the world saw Janelle Brown at last. Not the quiet, practical wife. Not the voice of reason, but a mother at her limit. A woman broken and rebuilt by suffering. And she was no longer going to remain silent. The judge motioned for Janelle to back away from the stand, providing her a moment to collect herself. Red-faced from crying, but her eyes now ablaze with intensity, she had spoken what needed to be said, though the courtroom sensed that this was far from finished. The air hung thick, heavy with the sort of silence that comes after a storm. Everyone felt it. The truth had begun to seep out at last. But there was more, so much more. The judge glanced across the courtroom. We will hear now from the next witness. His voice rang across the room, firm but unyielding. A name was called by the clerk. And Kody Brown stood up slowly. Kody's testimony. Kody moved slowly, as if almost hesitating to the stand. The woman who had once been touted by her radiant energy and fierce grin now appeared smaller, her shoulders burdened with the weight of years of sorrow. Yet when she sat and brought her right hand up to swear, her chin set just slightly, a signal that she was here not to cower. Mrs. Brown, the judge said, you may speak. Kody's lips quivered. She grasped her hands together tightly, anchoring herself, and then her voice, weak but truthful, rang in the courtroom. Your Honor, I married Kody because I had faith in the dream. I had faith in the family. I believed that we were creating something beautiful, something that would demonstrate to the world that love could be greater than jealousy, greater than pride. But what we created wasn't a family, it was a stage. The words lingered there, cuts and irrefutable. Kody swallowed hard, tears welling in her eyes. I did try to keep it together. I tried to smile for the reporters, to smile for my kids. But behind those smiles I was shattering. Because each day, I saw him treat us as pieces of a puzzle he could reorder at will. And if we didn't fit, he shoved us off. Her voice broke, and she sobbed once in her throat. Kody covered her face with her hands, but the courtroom heard her words muffled. He broke us, Your Honor. He broke every promise he ever made. In the gallery, the face of her daughter Isabel contorted, tears streaming down her cheeks as she gazed at her mother. The judge hesitated, allowing Kody time to catch her breath. She finally dropped her hands, her face stained with tears, her voice shaking but firm. I loved him. I loved him for years. But love isn't enough when one person won't return it. She shifted her eyes to Kody. And you never did. Not to me. Not to them. You didn't love people. You loved power. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Kody's statement didn't hurt. She cut. Meri's testimony. When Kody departed, the clerk read another name. Meri Brown arose stiffly, as if her body bore decades of fatigue. Meri was always regarded as the first wife, the original base of the family. But when she rose to take the stand, that foundation was long broken. She sat, swore in, and for a while she was silent. Only silence. The judge nodded to her. You may proceed, Mrs. Brown. Her voice, when at last she spoke, was gentle, delicate, nearly shattered. I don't know where to begin, she confessed, her eyes dripping. Because for so long I lied to myself that silence was my job. That if I remained silent, if I suffered, if I bore the pain alone, somehow it would be enough to preserve this family. A tear slipped down her cheek. She didn't wipe it away. But silence only protected him, never us. The room fell into a hush. Meri's words, though quiet, carried a weight heavier than shouting ever could. She gripped her hands together tightly, her voice shaking. I lived in a marriage where I was invisible, where I was not valued. I remained, believing one day he would look at me and see the woman who had been with him from day one. But he looked right through me. Tears streamed freely now, her body shaking. Do you know what it's like, Your Honor? To be alive, invisible, to live in the same house but be a ghost? Her words boomed through the room like thunder. Kody shifted in his seat. Once his face showed uncertainty. He parted his lips, as if set to argue. But once more his lawyer stopped him with a firm hand. Meri leaned forward, her voice a low but cutting one. I said nothing because I believed that silence was strength. But silence was weakness, and I will never forgive myself for letting it keep him safe, at the expense of keeping my child safe. My family, my heart. Her words brought sobs from the gallery. Even strangers, reporters, and bystanders were wiping their faces. Robin's uneasy moment. As Meri exited the stand, the focus shifted to Robin. She sat statue still, twisting her nervous hands together. For so long she had been Kody's favorite, the recipient of his heart, his protection, his allegiance. But now, in this courtroom, the burden of that favor rested on her shoulders. The clerk called out her name. She stood slowly, her face was white, her lips pursed together. When she swore in and sat down, she avoided looking at Janelle and Christine. Her tone was low, quivering. I don't know what to say, she started, because I know what everyone believes about me. They believe I destroyed this family. They believe I stole him. But the thing is, I didn't ask for it. I didn't ask for him to leave the others behind. I didn't ask to be the only one he cared about. Gasps coursed through the courtroom. Robin teared up as she finally glanced at Janelle. But I couldn't help but deny it either. I saw it happening. I saw him choosing me, over and over and over again, and I kept my mouth shut, because his love was safe, and I didn't want to lose it. Her admission shook the courtroom. For the first time, Robin had confirmed what the world already knew, that Kody's favoritism ruined the core of the family. The children speak. Lastly, the judge summoned the voices everyone had been expecting, the children. Gabriel walked forward first. His face was white, his jaw was set, his eyes burning with rage and sorrow. He took the witness stand, was sworn in, and then in a voice trembling with emotion he began to speak. I lost my brother. Garrison is dead, and I blame the man seated right there. He pointed straight at Kody. His voice broke, but he didn't quit. My father's pride broke our family apart. His pride killed Garrison, and now we all have to live with it. While Gabriel's voice sounded angry, his whole body shaking, he still behaves like a victim. The words crashed like thunder. The courtroom is filled with screams. Savannah, tears streaking down her face, stepped into the witness stand next. Her voice was softer, torn, but no less devastating. All I ever wanted was my dad. Not the TV star, not the man who gave speeches about family. Just my dad. And I never got him. She wept into the room. Even the judge's face softened, his eyes weighed with compassion. The testimonies came cascading in like a deluge, each speaker piling on another dimension of sorrow, another layer of reality. And by the time the final witness left the stand, the whole courtroom was overwhelmed with years of suffering. It was no longer a trial, it was an unveiling. The world had finally heard the truth about Kody Brown. The testimonies had ended, yet the courtroom still vibrated with raw pain. Christine's sobs, Meri's quiet regrets, Robin's uneasy confession, and the children's heartbreaking cries had filled the air like thunder rolling across a dark sky. Every corner of the room carried the weight of a family stripped bare, its wounds exposed. And then the judge turned his gaze back to Janelle. Mrs. Brown, he instructed firmly, his voice carrying around the chamber, you may resume the stand for closing testimony. The room had fallen silent all of a sudden. The muttering died down. Even the clicking of pens by reporters ceased. Everyone was aware this was the time when Janelle, the voice of reason for so many years, would have her last say. Janelle rose slowly. Her feet were heavy, her face streaked with tears, but her back straight, chin up. This wasn't simply another testimony. This was her reckoning, the reckoning of a wife, a mother, and a woman who had borne more than her fair share of heartache. As she returned to the stand, she hesitated, both hands on the wood. She shut her eyes tightly, took a deep breath, and when she opened them, she met Kody's. For years she had shied away from this look, from the bramble of ego that he used as cover. But today she did not fear. Her words were hushed at first, but they traveled like a whisper in a cavern, quiet but hard to deny. My son is gone. The words hit the room like a bell. Sobbing that was muffled vibrated through the gallery. My son is gone, she said again, her voice firmer now, and though I cannot alter that fact, I can ensure that the world understands why. Her hand shook as she pressed it to her chest, but her gaze never wavered from Kody's face. Garrison didn't leave this world because he was weak. He didn't leave because he wasn't loved by us. He left because the man who should have been his greatest protector became his greatest wound. Kody winced visibly, his jaw clenching, his face going pale. For the first time that day, his self-control failed. Janelle's voice grew, brimming with anguish and passion. Your Honor, this man, this husband, this father, let us down. He let our children down. He valued his pride over their lives, his ego over our happiness, his control over our freedom. I stood by him for decades. I tolerated his neglect. I fought for him against the world. And all I received in return was blame, anger, and loneliness.
Tears flowed down her cheeks, but she did not pause. The tears ceased to be a weakness, they were her armor. I pleaded with him to visit our children, I pleaded with him to love them just the same, but he would not. He punished those who dared to defy him, he drove away the ones who would not adore him, and now my son is dead, and I will carry this pain every day of my life. Her frame shook, but her tone became harder, slicing through the courtroom with accuracy. I don't come here seeking sympathy. I don't come here portraying myself as the victim. I come here because the truth has been buried for too long. The truth is that Kody Brown broke this family. The truth is that he let us disintegrate, piece by piece, and never once looked over his shoulder. Gasps rippled through the gallery. Some shook their heads in horror. Others put their hands over their mouths, shaking with them, and crying openly. Janelle breathed in again, her eyes blazing at Kody now. Her words were not for the judge, or the jury, or the people in the audience. They were for him. You wanted power, Kody. You wanted control. You wanted us to obey and surrender to you and claim it as love. Well, here it is. You controlled us into heartache. You asked for respect, but didn't give us any. You demanded loyalty while leaving behind those that you needed the most, and I will never forgive you for that. She gasped for air, but the fierceness in her eyes didn't fade. You made our children grow up thinking they weren't good enough. You made them think they had to battle each other for your love. Do you see what that does to a child? Do you see what that does to a family? You took their innocence away from them. You took their trust away from them. And then when they were shattered, you blamed them for breaking. The judge fidgeted in his seat, his face pinched, but he did not interrupt. He knew that this was no normal testimony. This was history in the making in raw emotion. Janelle's tears kept falling, yet her voice grew louder, more ferocious. You called yourself a father, but a father shows up. A father loves without conditions. A father does not turn his children into sacrifices for his pride. She stopped, her breathing uneven. Her hands clamped on the stand so hard that her knuckles were white. And then, speaking in a voice that made the walls shake, she said, "You are not a father. You are not a husband. You are a man who allowed his family to die when he was standing there, shovel in hand." The courtroom gasped as one. Some wept openly. Christine covered her mouth with both hands, crying. Meri buried her face in her hands, shaking. Even Robin went white, her hands shaking as she pressed at her eyes with a tissue. Kody remained immobile. His face was stone, but his eyes flashed anger, terror, shame, all struggling behind his eyes. Janelle only turned away from him, her back to the judge again. Her tone was gentler now, but it had the ring of finality. Your Honor, I am not requesting that you repair what has been damaged. No one can. I am not requesting that you restore my son, or remove the years of anguish we suffered. I am merely requesting recognition, for the truth to be heard here today, in this courtroom, so my children understand they were never the issue. So they understand it was never their fault. So they understand it was him. Her tears fell in silence as she murmured the final words. It was always him. The room hung in complete silence. No cough, no shuffle, only the sound of muffled sobs, and the thumping of hearts. For years, Janelle had been the quiet one, the patient one, the steady one. But today, she was the storm. And nothing in that courtroom, nothing in Kody's life, would ever be the same again. The quiet after Janelle's last words was more oppressive than chains. It hung over all of them in the room, bending even the strongest ones' heads in submission. The gallery held its breath. Reporters who were there for sensationalism now sat aghast, pens hovering in mid-sentence. The atmosphere was so heavy with pain and fury that even respiration seemed a betrayal. Kody Brown remained seated at his table, immobile. His jaw clenched, but his eyes betrayed him, dashing, restless, pleading for escape. For years he had been invincible, the leader, the father, the man who commanded respect but never returned it. Now his disguise was beginning to crack before everyone's eyes. And then, the gavel came down. The judge, an older man with silver hair and lines etched deep into his face, leaned forward, his hands folded carefully, but his eyes carried the weight of what he had just witnessed. He cleared his throat, but for a moment, even he struggled to find words. A courtroom has heard a lot today, he started, his tone firm but somber. I have heard cases of betrayal, of loss, of broken families, but very few times have I witnessed such raw, unfiltered pain exposed. The room was silent, holding its breath. He looked at Janelle, then Christine, then Meri, then Robin. The stories these women, your wives, Mr. Brown, have told, have uncovered more than shattered marriages. They have uncovered a shattered legacy, a family destroyed not by fate, but by decisions, by pride, by ego. Kody's eyes flashed with anger, his fists clenching, but he remained mute. For once he was without power. The voice of the judge became sterner. It is not for me to decide about love. It is not for me to decide about how a family is formed. But when love becomes used as a tool, when family becomes war, and children are the casualties, then the truth has to be told, even if it hurts. Gasps spread through the court. Some agreed by nodding. Others silently cried. The judge settled back in his chair, the sharpness of his tone. Mr. Brown, you are accused, not legally, perhaps, but by those who loved you best. You have heard their screams, you have witnessed their tears, and though this court cannot sentence you as your family, and others may want, understand this. The people's judgment is a heavier sentence than any jail cell. Kody gulped. He glanced at Janelle, but she refused to meet his eyes. Christine gazed at the ground. Meri silently wiped her tears. Robin held onto her tissue, white and shaking. The judge turned to the audience now, his words ringing out. Let this serve as a warning. Let this be remembered. Family is not possession. Family is not control. Family is not something to bend until it shatters. A father who disobeys his children, a husband who manipulates his wives. He may not be held accountable by the law, but he will be held accountable by the truth. And the truth, as we have heard here today, is inevitable. A silence had descended upon the room once more. It no longer felt like a courtroom, so much as a church, where confessions had been heard, and judgment had been passed.
Then the final crack of the gavel. This court is adjourned. The sound echoed like thunder. For a very long time, no one stirred. People remained still, taking in the gravity of what they had witnessed. And then, one by one, the spell was broken. The quiet sobs filled the air
Janelle
again.
stood
The
up
scuffling
first,
of feet,
her
the creak
face
of
smeared
benches.
with
The
tears,
trial had ended,
but her
the tale
stance
was far
firm.
from over. The
She passed
aftermath.
by Kody without a second glance. For years she had been behind him. Today she passed by him, forward, liberate. Christine came next, her hand on her chest, as if keeping her heart intact. Tears were in her eyes, but relief was there as well, an odd sort of peace. She knew her truth had been uttered at last. Meri walked silently, practically ghost-like, her head down. She didn't say a word, but the agony in her eyes spoke volumes, that the world knew she had said all that she could. Robin hesitated, caught between fidelity and fear, but even she left Kody in the end. Her steps were uneven, but they went away, not towards. Kody sat alone now. For the first time in decades, he had no wives at his side, no children at his feet, no family to protect him. He was not the patriarch, not the leader, not the man in charge. He was simply a man, alone, broken, and vulnerable. The cameras flashed, freezing his stillness, his silence. His kingdom of love and devotion had dissolved, not with a bang, but with the whispers of voices at last telling the truth. Outside the courthouse. When the family stepped outside, the crowd was waiting. Reporters swarmed, microphones extended, cameras clicking rapidly, but no one spoke. Janelle simply lifted her head, her face resolute. She didn't need to explain anything. The world had already heard enough. Christine held Meri's hand tightly, a rare unity forged from shared wounds. Robin kept her distance, dabbing her eyes, unsure of what tomorrow would bring. And far in the distance, Kody came. His face was white, his eyes empty. The crowd gasped with questions, shouts, blame, but he never spoke. He wrapped his coat about him, shoved through the blinding lights, and melted into the night, like a shadow fading away from the sunlight. The Brown family would never be the same. The courtroom had not healed their wounds, had not erased their pain, but it had done something of equal value. It had spoken the truth. For years the world had sat in front of their television screens, laughing and smiling, pretending. But today the masks were removed. Today the truth was etched into history. Garrison's death wasn't just a tragedy, it was proof of years of neglect, years of suffering, years of silence finally bursting into words too loud to be silenced. And even though the family emerged broken, they emerged free from the burden of silence, from the shackles of pretense, from the hold of one man's vanity. The tale did not conclude with justice in the legal sense, but with justice in the sense of human beings. And sometimes that is the only kind of justice the world is able to provide.